Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a very special edition of the Three Technique, a college football podcast here at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. I'm Garrett Turney, and with me, Jake from the Walk-On Redshirts. Appreciate you coming on tonight, and we're glad to have you, obviously. It's always a good time to have you guys over.
Yeah, absolutely. We always love joining you guys, and I know that we've had a couple of you over on our side before, too.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. You guys are doing great work over there. Always fun to kind of, pair up and do that. I know that on the front end of this playoff, we got to have your buddy William on, so we got to have him over doing a lot of the reaction to stuff. And now at the tail end of the playoff, don't know if anybody watched the national championship game, but Jake gets to celebrate a little bit because his Ohio State Buckeyes are national champions. We are taking a victory lap tonight. And by the way, this victory lap is sponsored by Home Field Apparel. You can go use our code. You can find it in our bio and our link and the description. I'm sure it'll be all sorts of places. So go pick something out. Go pick out your Ohio State national championship gear. I'm sure they got a bunch of that good stuff up there too. So go check that out. But Jake, first off, it's been a week now. We're recording this Monday night, the Monday following the national championship game. It's been a week. It's settled in a little bit. I'm sure that the wallet's hurting a little bit from all the gear that you got to purchase. But how is it feeling that your Ohio State Buckeyes are national champions?
The one thing is my wife got all of her gear because we went out this past weekend.
Sure.
I looked today to see when my stuff would ship, and I got told it'll be March 1st. So I have a little ways before. I bought more stuff for, the man cave for stuff to hang out. I don't buy as many sweatshirts and T-shirts, but she found a couple things. And, yeah, the wallet hurts a little bit more. The wallet does hurt a little bit more after that. But, no, incredible experience. We got to go down to Atlanta for the game. Obviously people saw the ticket prices. I'll be honest, we did not pay those ticket prices.
Okay.
We were very fortunate. Season ticket holder. Well, we are season ticket holders with Ohio State. I try to be less partial when I'm doing all sorts of content, but when it comes down to I am an Ohio State fan, season ticket holder. My wife went there. My parents went there. And we got them at a season ticket holder discount. So full transparency, you paid like $500 a ticket for my seats. That's really, really good compared to the 3,000-4,000 that they were posting online.
Yeah, that's not bad, and especially the venue. I mean, the venue is so nice, fantastic experience, and to be able to go to that game. So I guess first question, did y'all fly or drive? Did y'all make a road trip out of it?
Yeah, so we actually drove. So Columbus to Atlanta was only about 8 hours. So we ended up actually doing a day in Nashville, a day in Chattanooga, and then down to Atlanta because it was we left Saturday, didn't have to take work off. Highly recommend doing a little road trip out through Tennessee. It was a lot of fun. A really nice. Good way, just in case it went bad. We were going to have a memorable trip one way or the other.
Might as well have you couch it a little bit with but Nashville, that was fine.
Yeah, exactly.
We lost, but it's okay. We got to go see Nashville. Did you get to see the field goal posts sticking up out the water? Did they rescue those from that Vandy upset earlier in the year?
I did go searching for the Vandy field goal posts. I did not find them. I'm guessing they are resting safely at the bottom of the river.
Okay, well, that's good news. That is amazing news for those Vandy fans. You guys won too. So you get to the game. Obviously, and I want to kind of get into this on the front end, but there were some emotional stakes for you in this one before we kind of talk about the game itself. Just kind of want to jump into that and let you kind of take the floor. I know that this one meant a bunch to you and meant a bunch to kind of your family being able to do this. I'm going to kind of just open up the floor to you to get to talk about that and just how much this one meant for you.
Yeah, I mean, so we're all college football fans, and we all acquire our fandom in different ways. And, I can think back to my earliest memory of Ohio State football. 2001 is the Ohio State-Michigan game. Jonathan Wells goes bonkers, and that is the first memory I have of Ohio State because I kept thinking back of, at that point, Ohio State-Michigan was played the weekend before Thanksgiving. And actually, I remember putting the Christmas tree up that day. And that's because it was pushed back a week because of 9/11. 9/11 pushed the whole season back 1 week. So that's why the memory sticks out that we were actually putting it up because it was after Thanksgiving. 2002, Ohio State goes on the run. That's when I really started to get into college football a little bit more. I wasn't like a diehard watching it every week because I was still 8 years old or something like that. So I wasn't every single weekend, but I was watching a lot more consistently. And I remember the national championship game, sponsored by Tostitos at that point. An hour before kickoff, my dad looks at me and goes, "We got to go out and get some Tostitos because, it's the Tostitos. Yeah. We've got to get Tostitos." My dad, being the cynical person he was, I was like, "Really? We're gonna leave?" Ran to Kmart, RIP Kmart, to buy some Tostitos chips and cheese and make some homemade nachos. Obviously, Ohio State wins in double overtime, and I would say it was signed, sealed, delivered at that point. That you win the national championship, double overtime. I remember calling my grandmother at like 1:00 in the morning because I knew they were up. My dad knew that my grandfather was 100% up at 1:00, and we were calling, we're celebrating. Fandom signed, sealed, at that point. Obviously, the next 20 years as the what does Herb Street call them? The whatever we are the annoying fan base. Yeah. Yeah, I became one of those diehards,
Sure.
handful of years, watching football pretty much consistently every week with my dad. Even as going through, national championship losses, 06, 07, scandal, finally winning back again in 14, even after, went to college, moved out, I would say basically every Sunday, every Monday, calling my dad, talking about Ohio State football every weekend. Doesn't matter if they're playing Kent State or Michigan State, Oregon, Oklahoma, anyone in between, we were every weekend. It wouldn't be that day. And it was always hilarious because I could picture exactly how the text messages would go with my dad, because as soon as the other took a lead, Marshall could be up 3-0. I'd get a text message, "We're going to lose today." I'm like, "No, we're not." 10 minutes left in the first quarter and they're up 3-0. We are not going to lose today. I can promise you that.
The sky is not falling. Don't worry.
Which, for the whole run of the playoffs, there was a little bit of, Ohio State obviously handled Tennessee. They handled Oregon, but obviously this was the first year without my dad watching college football with me. So it's definitely a little bit different. The last game I watched with my dad was the Missouri game. Terrible freaking game to watch.
Yeah,
honestly.
gosh.
Couldn't be any worse. Went to the 2022 Michigan game. Really would have loved to win there, but with him.
Gosh, man.
But obviously, so my dad passes, and then this is the first year. So, the very first game kind of hits a little bit different. There's no phone call after the game. There's no phone call to talk about. There's no text messages during the game. It's not, you're not getting those text messages. Usually he was the one I would text with the most about the football game. Yeah. Wouldn't really call because that wasn't what our style. That wasn't what we did during the game. It was after the game we talked about it, because either I'd have to call him and talk him off a ledge, being like, "Dad, Indiana's up 14-7. It's the first quarter. Chill out. Relax. I can promise you it's fine. This game's far from over."
Yeah.
But, as you go through the season, obviously the expectations with Ohio State, they were massive. They came out and they said, "Now to your bust." And, I go to almost all the Ohio State home games. I've gone to plenty of away games, and they just start to hit a little bit different. You think, okay, you lose to Oregon, but okay, the season's still alive. Yeah. You get there, you're Michigan, you're 17-point favorites or 19-point favorites or whatever it was at this point. You go, okay, hey, first season without doubt, we're going to beat Michigan. No. And then you're like, well, dang, like this really felt like this should have been a little bit of destiny here. Yeah. But then sure enough, gets turned around. All of a sudden, Tennessee happens. All of a sudden, they beat the snot out of Oregon. Texas was a nail biter. And then like it almost felt like with the Notre Dame game. So Ohio State obviously goes up big. They're up 31-7. Notre Dame claws back in it. And it's like almost like I'm ready for that text message of like, Notre Dame's going to come back and win this game. And I'm thinking, Dad, swear if I get this freaking text message of like Notre Dame's going to come back and win this game, I already know the exact text response to be like, shut up and watch the game is what my response would be. No, so that's we're all college football fans, and there's all fandoms, but like that's my story of how it became such a diehard passion, and spending Saturdays, it became more than just Ohio State, throughout the years. Where Saturdays then, especially when I was in high school, when I wasn't working, it was okay. Yep, we'd have people over, on Saturdays, we'd watch football all day. Whether it was a big game, small game, there was always people that wanted to come over because all my friends were, Penn State. I had Miami fans, I had all sorts of other people, Oregon. people that were just fans of different schools, not because of affiliation. I grew up in Pennsylvania, so there were plenty of Penn State fans around, but people were always wanting to watch the other big games. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And I think that's a cool story that resonates, right? And it's cool to be able to share that. And a lot of us get our fandom from a dad or someone like that, and to be able to kind of get that awesome moment, to kind of finish the season with the ups and downs that it was for Ohio State this year, and there were some ups and there were some downs. To be able to get that, and to finally, seems like it's been a little while. We've been waiting for Ohio State to make that jump, and you have 2020 and that whole thing happened. And I just think, okay, like, when are they finally going to get over the hump? And to be able to do it this year is such a cool moment. I think it resonates with a lot of people that that's that moment for you and for your dad.
Yeah, and like it truly felt like fate for like my wife and I to go to that game because we're season ticket holders. We could have opted in for any postseason games. We opted in to go to Tennessee. We were about an inch away from going to the Rose Bowl, about an inch away. We had everything basically ready to go, and then we found out she wasn't going to have off January 2nd, which we would fly back. So we weren't going to be able to do that. So we said, okay, maybe that just wasn't meant to be. And of course, then we were sick on like New Year's Eve. So we're like, okay, we wouldn't really want to fly out to California on New Year's Eve. Cotton Bowl comes. We had no interest in going to Dallas, absolutely none. And then also the storm that was coming and hit Dallas, we said none. And the day before the Cotton Bowl, we get offered tickets to go to the national championship game. And at that exact time, if anybody has gone through all this, you go through a whole state process of, any sort of, personal belongings and whatnot. So the last thing I had to do was close out Dad's bank account, which was a checking account, and had, I kid you not, basically the enough money to cover the hotels and the tickets. And I go, there's no other way that my dad would have want this money to be spent than on two national championship tickets, my wife and I, and lodging to go to this game.
Wow. That's that's cool. I'm like over here, goosebumps starting to pop up. That's cool.
It's like when I think like there was fate, it's like we didn't opt in for tickets, but one of my good friends got tickets by accident because he didn't know if he was going to get tickets. So everybody he knew requested tickets, and he got them and just sent me a message. Hey, I got these. Do you want them? Wow. I said yes. And yes, as long as they make it, because it was Thursday. We still didn't even know if we're going because they played Friday night. Mm-hmm. We're like, you know what? Screw it. Like, well, this is a chance. We don't know if we're going to get to do it again. Take it, take it while you can. So not that Notre Dame didn't have a chance, but fate was kind of on Ohio State's side that night.
There were too many things pushing in the Buckeyes' favor on that one. I give you that. And it kind of felt like it had to be fate, right? Because at the end of the season, and I don't want to get too much into the bad side of things. We'll go back to the celebrating in a second. But man, after that Michigan game, was there any part of you that was sitting there and you were saying, we got this in the bag, we're about to make this playoff run? Like, I know that there are a bunch
after
of
Michigan, I was questioning if we were even going to make the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, and
because of how bad of a loss that was.
A bunch of Ohio State fans were like calling for the guy's job, and like, and I totally don't blame y'all. Like, I have no issue with that. If you're not going to beat Michigan, if you're going to take a talented roster, and lots been made of the money spent on the roster and the transfers and everything else, but if you're going to take a roster like that and you can't even beat a bad Michigan team, and granted they finished okay for the season, but that's a bad Michigan team. Like, what are we doing here? I don't blame you for coming for the guy's head.
Oh, I think there is a justifiable case that if this was not the 12-team playoff, that would be considered the worst Ohio State loss in 20 years. And that's including the Purdue loss, including the Iowa loss. Mm-hmm. Like, I think there is a justifiable case that without the 12-team playoff, that is the worst Ohio State loss in 20 years because of where you were, the stakes. You win, you go to the Big Ten championship. If this is a 4-team playoff, you're already eliminated. You make the you make the Big Ten championship. You have a puncher's chance even if you lose technically to make the 4-team playoff, depending on how it happens. You'll have a 1-point loss to Oregon. Very, very different case. And you don't even have to win convincingly. You just have to win by 1 point. Mm-hmm. Nobody's out there. Everybody obviously wanted to win by a lot, but nobody is, everybody's just dying for the win. You can win 13-12 and people will be like, well, that kind of sucked, but at least we won.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's I mean, I just don't even know what that would have been like to have not made the play. And obviously this goes back to the thing that we've been talking about, is that the playoff expansion was good because it takes the committee out of it. And one of the things I've said is, that Ohio State wouldn't have even made the ESPN graphic with the top 6 like they had been doing for the first 2 out. They wouldn't have even made the graphic.
No,
They
they
went
wouldn't
through
have.
and had a freaking awesome run. Obviously, like you've mentioned, stomping Tennessee. I know a lot of people picked that, to be a Tennessee game. A lot of people are saying, kneeling north, and we're going to come in there and do that thing. That didn't happen. Oregon obviously was never close. I was just standing there watching my TV with my jaw on the floor, like, oh my gosh, they're boat racing these guys.
Yeah,
And then
nobody had 34-0 in the second quarter on their bingo card.
Yeah, no, there were a lot of situations you could see, right? You could say, oh, maybe they pull away late. Oh, maybe this will be like a back and forth. I could have seen it being low scoring or high scoring. No part of me was sitting there like, oh, yeah, Ohio State's going to boat race these guys at the gate. They're going to run like 10 plays and they're going to be averaging like 2 points a play or something. I had no idea that was going to happen. So that was awesome. Just to be clear, that was amazing. And sometimes blowouts can be fun too. But obviously, take care of business against Texas. Probably a little too close for comfort. They came in with a great game plan for how to play you guys on the defensive side. But after that, I mean, let's jump into the game for just a second. You were obviously there. That's freaking awesome to be able to be in the stands for that. Hope that I get the chance for that at some point in time in my life. That's just a hope at the moment. But you're up there in the stands. Notre Dame comes out, punches y'all in the face real quick, and just, I mean, drags it out. Long drive. And for a minute there, I think a lot of people were saying, we're going to have a game on our hands if Notre Dame can do this. And then we didn't have a game on our hands for pretty much the rest of the night, outside of some heroics from Jaden Greathouse on the Notre Dame side. Ohio State runs away with it. Obviously wins 34-23. Quinshon Judkins has 3 straight touchdowns in that one. I mean, an absolute stud. Take me through the game a little bit. What were some of your favorite moments? Some of those big swings, when did the crowd go crazy? When were some of those moments on that Ohio State side where you're like, oh, that's going to stick in my memory now?
Yeah. So first, I would say that one thing is that there's a lot of reports of like, was it 50-50? Was it 60-40? I would say that for the fans, I would say I would lean Ohio State, but not like a significant amount. Walking around, there was tons of green. The only difference I saw, and this is, remember, I'm on one sideline, is in the upper deck of Notre Dame sideline, it was definitely a little more sprinkled red than the Ohio State sideline was sprinkled green. So that's where I'll give, the tip of the cap, 55-45 is what I'll say. So in general, that when Notre Dame scored, it was loud. Like when Notre Dame scored that first touchdown, it was loud. And the echoes on the other side. And, that first drive definitely sticks because of how long it was. And when you're in the stands there, you don't know everything that's going on. So, you get text message after the first one of Riley Leonard just threw up. What do you mean he threw up?
Yeah.
What do you mean threw up? He just scored a touchdown. What do you mean he threw up? And, you get text message. Well, he ran the ball 9 times and he's exhausted. When people aren't sure if it's nerves, if it's exhaustion, he landed on the ball. There's all sorts of weird speculation going on. So, you're kind of in the dark compared to what, you have to check Twitter basically to see what's going on. Other than that, you just think everything's fine. The response from Ohio State, I think the fake reverse pass to Jeremiah Smith, obviously that first touchdown, you're just like, wow, like, you don't notice the time, but then you see the replay and you're like, what the heck was Chip drawing up? And then you hear that they stole it from the 2020 Alabama team that ran it straight up against Ohio State. You're like, wow. Ryan Day's had that saved for a while, and he's been ready to use it, and he waited till this moment. You're like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. The rest of the other 2 scoring drives, I would say, obviously they were good, but I would say there wasn't as many memorable things. Quinshon Judkins coming out straight in the second half and running 70 yards straight through the middle of the game. I couldn't tell if he lost gas or if he kind of misstepped and just kind of like slowed down because he stumbled, falls down the 5-yard line. I think that Quinshon Judkins, 70-yard run, if he had scored, he's already a legend, but there would have been the comparison to the Zeke 85-yard run. They would have had the photo of him somehow running with all the Notre Dame fans behind him. There's an iconic photo of Eddie George running with all the Notre Dame players behind him. You would have had one of those. But obviously then the very, very final pass play of the game, Jeremiah Smith, 59 yards or whatever it was. Ohio State has an incredible black and white photo where all the players basically are on their sidelines holding their breath, except the quarterbacks have their arms up because they know what's about to happen because the ball, you can see it. And they know there's no way Jeremiah Smith's dropping this pass.
No chance. Dude, that was, I mean, what a moment, right? I mean, I'm trying to think, because that's got to be the moment that seals it, right? Like, I don't know if there was something else in the game where you're like, no, we got this. There's no way we're losing. Or if there's another moment where you're like, no, this is for sure it. Or maybe even like what you said, there might have been a moment there where, Jaden Greathouse comes down to that one hander and you're like, uh-oh, here we go again. Like, we're going to melt down at the very end. I can't believe it. I don't know if there's a moment like that, but.
It was basically, it felt pretty close when they went for or kicked the field goal and missed it. Still confusing. Still very confusing.
Yeah.
I heard Marcus Freeman's reason of, he felt that if they kicked the field goal, then they could score twice and not have to get 2-point conversions. They thought he would be easier. So basically he went against the analytics. I kind of get that because it is not easy to gain 2-point conversions, but they had moved it. There wasn't a ton of time left. Anyways, I had kept saying that they needed one more score because they kicked the field goal after the botched fake punt. And all it did was make it from 21 to 24. And I thought they had to get it one more score to get it away. And they couldn't. Emeka Egbuka fumbles after I come home and watch the broadcast. Chris Fowler literally says, they don't fumble much. And then Emeka Egbuka literally fumbles 12 seconds later.
There's nobody better at that than Chris Fowler, man. He is so good at the announcer jinx. He's perfect at it.
So that whole time it's like, all right, you either need to get stop or you need to score. One of the two. And you got the field goal, but it felt like there was still just too much time because Ohio State had kind of really started to go conservatively. But you're sitting there on 3rd and 11, and at least everybody around me is thinking, you've got to throw this. If you're running the ball here, you're not going to win this game, or at least we're going to overtime because you can't. Now, did I think they were going to throw a fade route from 40 yards down the field? No, I didn't. I don't think anybody thought that was the play call. But Ohio State put out their video of the recap, and Will Howard and Emeka Egbuka are sitting there with the tablet in there, and they say, we need to take advantage of 29. He keeps pressing the inside. We have a chance to go outside on him. Christian Gray, who happens to be guarding Jeremiah Smith on that final play, and he tries to protect the inside, and Jeremiah Smith just makes one move and goes outside and has about 15 yards of separation between them.
Yeah. And look, for a lot of receivers, that's not a bad strategy, and it's played them pretty well this year. Jeremiah Smith's a little bit different. I don't know if you know that, but he's a little bit different when it comes to receivers. He can make you pay on that, and he did. He sealed it. That was and we were talking about it in the post-game show. We were talking about the decision making down the stretch, and if Ohio State were to have run QB power, whatever the heck that was, to set it up for 3rd and 11, and then didn't convert and has to kick it back to Notre Dame. Somehow they falter down the stretch. They would have been crucified.
Oh, yeah.
And they would have been destroyed for play calling, for decision making, for being too conservative. At that point in time, Notre Dame had a lot of momentum. What are you doing? And that's where I said, like, look, especially if you miss that pass somehow, like if it gets overthrown or maybe just better coverage, there's gonna be a lot of people like, and you let them save the timeout. And that's, I get it. Like, I totally get it. But that's where good players can sometimes bail out a coach, or even sometimes just a coach saying, I just believe that I got better guys. I'm going to go trust my guys to go be better. Sometimes you have that, right? Sometimes you just get to say, my guy's better than your guy. I'm going to trust him to be better than your guy. This is the biggest stage. I'm going to let my guys go be the best that they are, right? And sometimes that's all that it takes. But man, what a moment. That was something else.
Yeah, I think no matter what happens with Jeremiah Smith over the next 2 years, and obviously we all have high expectations. I mean, he already cemented himself in college football history because he made the biggest play on the biggest stage.
No, absolutely. And it's incredible to think about where he's going to go in his career. Of course, the
Miami for $4.5 million.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if you have the money to dish out to keep him right now. I don't know where the coffers are. They passing the plate around at Ohio State right now. They're making sure we can find anything we can to keep the kid. Of course, that's tongue in cheek. I can't envision a world where he actually leaves. At least I hope not for y'all's sake. That he's a heck of a player. I want to kind of shift it to Ryan Day for a second as we start to kind of transition towards the end of the show. Ryan Day, obviously, this is going to do a lot for him and his legacy. This is going to do a lot for his job security, right? We mentioned a little bit earlier, after that Michigan loss, a lot of people questioning him. I don't think there's any questions right now about Ryan Day's job security. And of course, the Ohio State fans right now have to be saying, just please beat Michigan next year. Please find some way to do it. We can't make it that many years in a row. But I kind of want to look ahead to next year a little bit. He's secured himself. He's up there now. He's won a championship. There's a bunch of departures right now. There's going to be some turnover. What do you think next year looks like for Ohio State, and how much grace do you think he's bought himself with the fan base?
I mean, he basically has bought himself. Next year it doesn't matter. But
Right.
The crazy thing is next year he probably has arguably two of the best players. If you said the two best players in the country were on Ohio State, I would believe you. If you said that Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith were the two best players in the country, I would believe you. And I think there's definitely a case that Jeremiah Smith could be the best offensive player in the country. There's some debate, I think, for Caleb Downs, but I mean, he's not outside the top 5, top
He's
7 at least.
Absolutely, he can ball.
Like there. So if you said their two best players are there, Carnell Tate, incredible. The offensive line, they lose both tackles, but all the interior, which was not the full interior, but is who played in the postseason. They go out and they get 2 transfers on the left tackle for right tackle. The running back position is going to be interesting because you lose Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson. They bring in C.J. Donaldson from West Virginia, who is not on the same level as Henderson or Judkins. And they have James Peoples, who was a fine backup. So I think running back is going to be a very interesting position. Julian Sayin, there's a lot of hype around him.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody in the country wanted him originally, and after Saban left, he transfers. He was on campus for about 6 days and then left. So I think the offense will be fine. The defense they're going to replace the whole defensive line. So that's a big thing. You lose Jack Sawyer, you lose JT Tuimoloau, you lose Tyleik Williams. The one thing about defensive lines, though, is those guys are all rotational pieces. Like nobody plays every snap. Yeah. You always have guys coming in. So guys will take expanded roles. I think the defensive line will take a little bit of a step back, but I think that they have talent on that side. You also have Larry Johnson, who, is known to be one of the best. Is he at the end of his tenure? I don't know. Secondary, I think he'll be fine. Davison Igbinosun's coming back. You got Caleb Downs. And then Jermaine Matthews played a ton this year. So you've got 3 of the 5, defensive back spots. Sonny Styles announced he's coming back. They rotate in Arvell Reese. So there's a lot of new pieces, but they're new to starting. They're not new to playing. And I think that's the understanding part. Other than Julian Sayin, basically everybody has played, a significant amount of snaps in their career. Yeah. So the key part here is going to be, the defensive coordinator. Jim Knowles obviously is from Penn State. Yeah. That's a massive, change. What does the new defense look like? I think they're going to try to keep the same system because that's the players they've recruited over the last, 4 years to fit that system. I think you're going to try to keep something very system. Matt Grieri, was Knowles' right hand for a while. He's right hand at Duke. Right hand, I forget if he was at Oklahoma State with him or not as well. But he was with him for a while. So there's speculation that he's going to be involved in the play calling of it because he understands and knows the system. But they're still probably going to bring in somebody with experience as well, and somebody a little bit older. Greer's only 35 years old, still a pretty young guy out there. But I think overall, this team should be expected to make the playoffs once again. Yeah. I mean, they do get a little bit of a difficult schedule. You open the season with Texas. They have Penn State, who Penn State comes to town, and the season-ending game against Michigan. I forget who their other conference games are, but I'm sure there'll be a couple ones that end up being a little more tricky than, not that an Indiana is going to suddenly pop up and become a top 10 matchup after being unranked, but I'm sure there'll be a couple other tricky games. I think Iowa might be in there. Illinois is one I think that's on the schedule. So a road game at Illinois could be an intriguing one. Yeah,
looking at it now, it's opens the season with Texas. Fortunately, get that one at home. Grambling, Ohio, that should be fine. You get a bye week at Washington, Minnesota at Illinois, at Wisconsin. Another bye week before Penn State. That's good to have the bye before that. At Purdue, UCLA, at Rutgers, and then playing in Ann Arbor. there's not a lot of excuses there. I mean, unless you see just some kind of massive fall off where a bunch of players fail to live up to expectations, which would take something pretty special. Right? If Julian Sands just not him,
But
he's just
we've
not that
seen
guy.
this stuff happen before. I mean,
Yeah.
LSU obviously they lost a ton, the year they won the national championship, but they still brought back a handful of guys,
Yeah.
and they just weren't the same. I don't necessarily know if you're going to see that kind of fall off like Michigan, last year, this year. I don't necessarily know if you're going to see that kind of fall off, but it wouldn't shock me because, the celebration, you're on top of the world, now all of a sudden you've got a target on your back as well. Not only is everybody already coming for you because you're already Ohio State, now you're the national champs, and we want to beat the reigning national champs.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tricky season, but I think I'm kind of with you. If they don't make the playoffs, I think that's disappointing. I think that they should at least make the playoff, and maybe they don't have it next year like they did this year. Maybe, there's something about the running game, maybe not quite clicking. Because, I mean, come on, man. Those running backs were such studs this year, man. Judkins and Henderson were so good. And maybe there's just something about that where it doesn't quite click. But they should definitely make the playoff. And in my opinion, I don't know that we could project it out right now. It's still a long offseason to go before we project out everything there. But, it should be a good season for him.
But back to your original question with this, how does this impact Ryan Day? He's bought himself grace. He's bought himself at least a year, if not 2 years of grace. There's some want to beat Michigan, but I think, let's say he goes out, somehow loses to Michigan again, wins another national championship.
Gosh, man.
I mean, what do you do at that point? Like, you do, and this is not like a bitter fan, but I think in general, the sport of college football, the rivalries are what make things great. But you have to understand that they are slowly becoming more just a game. If that is the end goal of winning a national championship, they're slowly becoming more of just a game because, I mean, you saw Ohio State lose to Michigan and it didn't matter. It really, because if they lost to Oregon, they would have been almost in the exact same spot, maybe a slightly different path. Maybe they did a 6 seed instead of this, the 7, maybe be a 5 seed, or instead of the 8, I guess they were. In general, though, like people say the regular season, still means more because now more teams get involved and whatnot. But if you're thinking about in the grand scheme of like Ohio State, Michigan, you want to go undefeated, you want to beat the other team, it doesn't matter as much anymore.
Yeah.
And that kind of sucks because it used to be, Woody and Bo, and it was those two. You won that, you're going to the Rose Bowl. If you're going to the Rose Bowl, you won the Big Ten, and that was the crown jewel. As long as you went to the Rose Bowl, and then didn't matter what happened. If you were crowned national champ, great. If you weren't, oh well. Like that's what it used to be. But the evolution of college football has changed so much.
Yeah. Well, and I think the good news is, and we'll kind of get out on this. The good news is I think that a lot of that still holds. And I'll ask you the same question that we asked our Ohio State superfan, Joe, who a good friend of the show. We had him on night of the championship. And his face and the way he responded to this question, I think, told you what you need to know about college football still. If I told you that over the next 5 years, you're going to win 2 more national championships, but you're going to have to lose to Michigan every single year to get there, is that a deal you're willing to make?
See,
that's about where Joe was too.
It's like if you had asked me that before I won a national championship, I'd be like, no, I want it. But now that you're telling me like, oh, I can win 3 over 5 or 6 years, and everybody else has to eat my crow. Michigan fans can talk whatever they want, but if they're not doing anything, nobody cares. Like, but every other team has to like, quote unquote, bow down to us. Like,
bow to me,
Like, that's a Saban-esque run. Saban lost to Auburn plenty. Like, it's a Saban-esque run, and I think if Ryan Day won 3 national championships, but only would have 1 win against Michigan, it'd be the very first year. I think his job would still be pretty safe.
This is probably fair. I love the face of the like, I don't love that process. Obviously, you want to beat your rival, and maybe the consequences of losing that game for the sake of the playoff, maybe they don't mean quite as much, but I have a feeling you ask that question to a bunch of Ohio State fans, and they're going to start to give you the same face that you're giving me. It's just going to, I don't love that.
It's so ingrained where it's like ingrained into your skull as soon as you're born of like, you beat Michigan. And now it's like, but it's not as important because everything is now about the national championship.
Yeah. And that's, I think, what makes this sport so special is there's always kind of that thing in the back of your head, right? There's always that little thing of, yeah, we won the Natty, right? We did it. That's cool. And then even with that, it's like, yeah, we've won it. But even next year, you're gonna sit there, you're like, we got to beat Michigan. We just got to find a way to do it, right? And you know, and maybe you go and win a national championship again, and you don't care quite as much, and it takes the sting off. But every single year, you kind of got to beat Michigan. You know, it's just kind of part of the deal. But I'll kind of give you the last word on this, man. Is there anything you wanted to say about this season, about this team? You know, take your extra little, you know, bit of sizzle on this victory lap. Do whatever you want to do with this last little bit. Shout out your channel. Do whatever you got to do. I'm gonna give you the floor for the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you having me here. You know, obviously, you know, first 12-team playoff, you know, Ohio State just wins the expanded playoff. So we just need to expand it to 15 next year and then 16, one at a time. That way they can continue to win. I'm not going up by 2 because we go to 15, then we'll win. Then we'll go to 16, then we'll win. 17, we'll win. And
sounds like a plan.
It's only going to take 100 years to get to 130. By then, we'll have another 100 teams in Division I. So we're just never losing again. I put out a stat today that in order for Ryan Day to beat Walter Camp's record for highest win percentage, you have to win every game between now and 2041. So here we go. Here we go. We just need to do that. Walter Camp had like a 97% win percentage. Ryan Day has the highest active at like 87.
That's just crazy.
He would need to win something like, I think it's 241 games in a row, something absurd. But no, this was, you know, the playoff. Obviously, you know, you go in very nervous, and then that first touchdown to Jeremiah Smith, I seriously set the tone for Ohio State. You know, Jeremiah Smith gets hit in the corner. Oregon, obviously, you know, they just take it to him, and you know, these are the runs where if your team gets on it, you know, it's memorable, and it's what makes the sport great. You know, you live in the moments and you enjoy it. But for anybody that wants to catch our content, we're over at the walkonredshirts.com. You can find us on, you know, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you get your content at Walk On Redshirts. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, our podcast is over there. Just basically wherever you get all your content. But we always do a ton of written content over at the walkonredshirts.com. It usually slows down a little bit right around now because everybody's exhausted and wants a little bit of a break from you know, February and March. But usually it starts kicking up right around May, right around the NFL draft time. We start kicking up all of our content again. So, you know, if you don't notice anything too new, you know, it's because we're all taking vacations. And then once we get to about May, Memorial Day, May-ish, starts to kick back up. But yeah, absolutely. Come give us a follow. We're almost at 10,000 followers on Twitter. Would love to help people get there, help us get there. So, you know, our goal is to get to 10,000 before the season starts. So come follow us on Twitter.
Yeah. And seriously, guys, like, go follow them. These guys put out great content. They're doing a lot of good stuff. And I'm sure this won't be the last time we talk to them this offseason. There is plenty to talk about, and it's going to be a long and dark and cold offseason. But for guys like Jake, it's not going to be quite as long, dark, and cold because the Ohio State Buckeyes are national champions, and they will stay that way until, I guess, until they don't get to repeat or until they get bounced from the playoffs or lose to Michigan or something like that. I don't know how that's going to work next season. We'll see. It'll be a long way until week 0, but we are excited for it. Anyway, guys, thank y'all for watching. We really appreciate it. Make sure that you are liking and subscribing. Go ahead and hit subscribe and you know, give us a little comment too. Tell us how this is. If you're an Ohio State fan, talk whatever you want to in the comments. Say what you need to. If you're not an Ohio State fan and you're upset about it, cry in the comments. We love that too. Do whatever you got to do. Go follow us on Twitter. You'll find every link below, as well as all the links to the Walk On Red Shirts over there as well. And for Jake and for Mitch and Trey, who weren't on the show tonight, I'm Garrett Turney. We will see y'all next time.
Gracious him. How about